Tuesday,
so we're going to be appealing this scam.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that Russia might not rule out the use of nuclear weapons if its sovereignty or territorial integrity were threatened. Addressing questions about the possibility of nuclear war and the implications for countries supporting Ukraine's attacks within Russian territory, Putin referenced the country's 2020 nuclear doctrine. This doctrine allows for nuclear options if a weapon of mass destruction is used against Russia or if the state's very existence is threatened.
For some reason, they believe in the West that Russia will never use it. We have our nuclear doctrine. Look at what is written there. If somebody's action will threaten our sovereignty and territorial integrity, we consider it possible to use all means at our disposal.
He also dismissed fears of a Russian attack on NATO countries, criticizing the perception of Russia as an enemy and arguing that such views were self-damaging. Despite ongoing tensions with NATO member states, Putin reiterated his stance against attacking the alliance.
They invented that Russia wants to attack NATO. Are you completely dumb, like this table? Who came up with that? That's nonsense, delirious nonsense. It would be nonsense if it were not designed to fool their own population.
He reacted to comments by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Germany's top military leader, who suggested that Russian aggression could extend to Europe and possibly result in an attack on NATO soil within the next 5 to 8 years.
Russia is also signaling that it might be ready to commit aggressive provocations, particularly against borders in the Baltic region. We must change this. The key to positive changes for us on the front and in the war overall is air defense, of course.
However, Putin hinted at potential escalations and asymmetrical military responses if Western countries, such as Germany and the United States, supplied Ukraine with weapons used on Russian soil.
Of course, such actions will they have already reached the highest degree of degradation, but they will completely destroy international relations and undermine international security. And ultimately, if we see that these countries are being drawn into a war against us, and this is their direct involvement in the war against the Russian Federation, then we reserve the right to act the same way. In general, this is a path to very serious problems.
Putin expressed defiance regarding the prospect of more Western missiles being approved for Ukraine's use, stating that Russia would enhance its air defense systems to counter these threats. Russian President Vladimir Putin declared on June 5th that the outcome of the upcoming US presidential election holds no significant importance for Moscow, asserting that the political landscape between the two nations is unlikely to shift, regardless of the victor.
We believe that the final result doesn't matter for us. We will work with any president the American people will elect.
Speaking at an economic forum in St. Petersburg, Putin accused the US court system of being employed in a political battle against former President Donald Trump, while criticizing the Biden administration for its handling of military support to Ukraine.
It is obvious all over the world that the prosecution of Donald Trump especially in court on charges that arose on the basis of events that took place a year ago, without direct evidence, is simply the direct use of the judicial system in the course of internal political struggles.
The 2022 invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which Putin frames as a defensive action against an expanding US-led NATO, has plunged Moscow-Washington relations to their lowest point since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Putin emphasized that Moscow would work with any president chosen by the American electorate, labeling Biden as a predictable politician and insisting that Russia has no interest in meddling in US domestic politics, a charge US intelligence services have frequently levied against the Kremlin.
Now, oddly enough, in the sphere of international politics, in domestic politics, and in economic policy, today's administration is making one mistake after another, one after another. Sometimes you are even surprised when you look at what is happening. That's why we look at it from the outside. We have never interfered with internal political processes in the United States, and we do not intend to interfere.
Putin's remarks reflected skepticism about any substantial changes in the US-Russia relations post-election, regardless of who occupies the White House. He pointed out that Trump's previous term had strained bilateral ties with sanctions and withdrawal from key treaties, casting doubt on whether a potential Trump return would alter this trajectory. However, Putin did not entirely dismiss the possibility of a policy shift. He suggested that a future US administration focusing on national interests, such as economic and financial strengthening, might pave the way for improved relations. He stressed that current US policies are more about asserting American dominance rather than supporting Ukraine. Furthermore, Putin criticized the US judicial system, arguing that it was being used by Trump's political adversaries to undermine his electoral prospects.
As for what's happening in the United States, you all know very well what is happening there in the course of the internal political struggle. They are burning themselves from within. Their state, their political system, and I must say, whether it is pleasant or not, but also their imaginary leadership in the sphere of democracy, they are burning it right at the root.
He contended that this strategy was damaging the US political system, describing the prosecution of Trump as politically motivated and lacking direct proof, with the global community perceiving it as an internal power struggle.
After the well-known court decision, where the jury returned a verdict of guilty, as we all know, everyone, Mr. Trump's rating increased, in my opinion, by 6%, and the donations to his campaign headquarters immediately increased. What does this mean? It means that people in the United States do not trust the judicial system that makes such decisions, but on the contrary, believe that they were made for political reasons.